Greetings. This is Mike Hildebrek. Today I'm going to talk to you about a subject matter that I've been studying on for a period of time now. I've entitled it The Facets of One. I've made this comment before. After 2,000 years of theology, doctrine, dogma, and churchianity, the painful truth remains. We still do not know, understand, pray to, and worship the God who Jesus claimed to be Father. Now, this is an important element. Because let's face it, we're not seeing the things that we have been promised within the scriptures. And I believe that it has everything to do with the relationship that Jesus had with the Father. Because Jesus said, I and my Father are one. Now, that claim is off limits to a variety of believers because they don't feel that they can make that claim about themselves. It's the territory, the sacred domain of Jesus alone, that Jesus and the Father are one. And there's no potential for you or any other person in Christendom to ride into the same arena that Jesus occupies. Even though we're co-heirs, even though we sit in heavenly places, we cannot actually seem to comprehend, just as Jesus did, that I and the Father are one. But let's take a look at what Jesus said. In his high priestly prayer, chapter 17 of John, he makes this comment, and I am no more in the world, these are in the world, and I come to thee. Holy Father, keep them in thy name, which thou hast given me, that they may be one, even as we are one. That they may be one, even as we are one. Clearly, the intention of both Jesus and the Father, who are one, is that we too be one with them and with each other. So we have to take a look at this oneness, this relationship of oneness, and try to bring some ability to maneuver through it in an appropriate fashion. And it requires really not a whole lot of new information as much as it's just applying the old. Now, one of the things that we need to be aware of is that being one and being united are not the same. You see, across the globe, people are united for one cause or another, which is admirable, and there's nothing wrong with that. But you can always be ununited with whatever cause that's there. But you can never be unone. Being one is always one. There's no subtraction or division. Whereas being united, there can always be subtraction, there can always be division. A few months ago, when we were studying The Universal Christ by Father Richard Rohr, he made a comment which I think right now plays in appropriately to where this lesson is headed. That comment was that Christ is God and Jesus is the Christ historical manifestation in time. Before you go getting all excited about that, let's finish it. Jesus is the third someone, not just God and not just man, but God and human together. So I think we need to understand that Christ, being God, is eternal. And Jesus, being man, is singular on a timeline. So Jesus comes into this earth, this realm, this material realm of humanity at a particular historical moment as Christ's chosen one. Now, this makes Jesus that third someone. He's not like anybody else on the planet. He is God and he is human together. But what he does in that capacity is show us how we too are to function and operate in this form as being, quote, according to Paul, in Christ, in him. I want to step back for a moment and take a look at Jesus, the man, and see what he says here, to see how he's setting up his relationship with the Father in their oneness. There's a point where the religious establishment comes to Jesus and asks him what's the greatest commandment, and Jesus answered them, the first of these commandments is, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. And thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, with all thy mind, and with all thy strength. This is the first commandment. Jesus said, this, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord, is the first commandment. This throws off a whole bunch of teachings that have permeated the Western church because they believe that the first commandment is the first commandment in the Ten Commandments that were given to Moses on Mount Sinai. And this particular commandment that Jesus is talking about actually shows up in Deuteronomy. But Jesus is saying this is the first commandment because this was the commandment that Israel, then as well as today, says every single morning in all of their prayer. This is the Hebrew Shema. And it is very specific. It's declaring the oneness of the Lord and how you are to respond in that oneness of the Lord. You're going to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. Now, Jesus then follows up with this. And the second is like, namely this, thou shalt love thy Lord as thyself. There is none other commandment greater than these. This commandment also throws most religious teachings into a tizzy because how in the world do you love your neighbor? What does it look like? And Jesus says, love your neighbor as yourself. And how does yourself love? Well, if you're following the first commandment, you are able to follow the second commandment. And that's why these things are important to recognize, because they are the two commandments that Jesus left to us as what we are to follow as, quote, Christians. And they are commandments that give us the opportunity to be able to see our relationship of oneness. Because eventually you want to come to the fact where it says, I and my Father are one, my neighbor and my Father are one, and we are one. Now, in this relationship of oneness, Jesus makes this comment to define what that looks like. In most solemn truth, I tell you, replied Jesus, that the Son can do nothing of himself. He can only do what he sees the Father doing. For whatever he does, that the Son does in like manner. The Son can do nothing of himself. He can only do what he sees the Father doing. There's a level of intimacy in here that states that if you have touched the Father, you will do only what is pleasing to the Father. The Son can do nothing of himself. And the problem that most programs that are going on out there in the world right now who believe that they're being directed by God is that many of them are actually being directed by the people that started them, and hoping that God would bless the results. It takes time and energy to see what the Father is doing so that you can do it. But this was the key to Jesus' relationship with the Father. This is the model that Jesus employs throughout his entire ministry. And we're expected to be able to pick that up and carry it forward. Now, in nature, there is this picture of a caterpillar turning into a butterfly. My question to you is, are they one? We know that they're the same animal, but there's a transformation that occurs inside of that chrysalis that is vital to understanding what's going on in their nature. But this is actually a picture of how our life is in this world. No, I don't want to say that we're maggots and worms and things like that. I'm not saying that. Just follow the example of the picture. When the caterpillar goes into its cocoon and it begins the process of metamorphosizing into a butterfly, there's a time, a moment within that cocoon that is just goo. I mean, it's not caterpillar and it's not butterfly. It's goo. But the cells in that goo know what they're supposed to do. There's a process that's involved in making the metamorphosis occur. And the cells know what to do. The seed of their identity knows what to do. And so they begin to arrange themselves into a particular pattern, into a particular process, through the process of setting themselves from that goo into the butterfly. And the evolution that occurs across the process eventually ends up with the butterfly coming out of the chrysalis. Now, this is a picture, I believe, of what Paul's trying to derive out of Galatians 2:20, where he said, I am crucified with Christ, nevertheless I live, yet not I, but Christ lives in me. And the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by the faith of the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. It's possible that what Paul is saying here is it's a deep insight that tells him, or that shows, I should say, the mystical nature of Christ on this planet in each of us. See, our outer form, the human form that we walk around in, is really kind of like a cocoon for the Christ that's within. And our old self is dying daily, being metamorphosized, I should say, into the new Christ that eventually will spring forth and show itself into this world. But it's a process. It doesn't happen overnight. It's a process that we develop where we're dying daily to ourselves. So let me take you for a moment into a journey about Omni. This is a subject matter that does dealing with some things that I think are going to be essential in learning how to work this relationship of oneness back into its original intent. Omni means all. That's all it really represents. And I was introduced by Joel Osteen in some writings that he did. He lived in 1892 through 1964, and he has many writings. He wrote a number of books over that course of his life, 30 or more, I believe. And he was really a modern day mystic. He had revealed to him back in the early 30s principles that he eventually just incorporated into what he called the infinite way. Now, it's possible you haven't heard of him, and that's not uncommon because Joel wasn't a person who wanted to promote himself. He was more interested in promoting the principles that had been revealed to him rather than himself. And so, even to this day, his material is out there, and people are employing it quite successfully around the globe. But they don't recognize that it's Joel that had basically initiated them into this particular movement. So let's take a look at what Joel did in the fashion of this Omni. You know, the infinite way employs a number of biblical principles. Now remember, these are biblical principles. Doesn't matter what denomination you are, but they are biblical principles. The three most stressed principles throughout the infinite way are the nature of God, the nature of prayer, and the nature of error. In every one of his writings, these three principles are at the forefront of all the writing. He goes over them again and again and again. From various angles, different facets are applied so that you can then see how it all incorporates into the whole picture. One of the first things that he recommends when you begin the study of God, to understand the nature of God, is to ask yourself this question: what is God? Now, before you answer it, don't answer it with something that you've been told. Because you need to consider that how you view God is often more of a concept than what he is. Over centuries, generations, millennia, we have developed concepts on how to describe God so that people have a better understanding of God, hopefully their relationship with God. But they're concepts, they aren't who God is. Joel's quite fond of saying, if you can explain it, it's not God. First of all, it is necessary to know the nature of God. This really means knowing that regardless of what our concept of God has been, or even perhaps still is, it is wrong. No matter how high the concept, it is still a concept. We have to lose all concepts and reach the consciousness that God is. That's from Joel's book, Living Now. It's a concept that all of us have been operating from. Ultimately, it's those concepts that have been pulling us further and further away from the oneness of our relationship to God. The secret of healing must inevitably be learned, first, that God is, and second, that the nature of God is good. The nature of God is love. The nature of God is wisdom. And the function of God is not only to create an image after his own likeness, but to maintain and sustain that image, including all mankind, in a divine embrace of harmony, wholeness, completeness, and perfection. This is the truth about God. Joel's book, The Art of Spiritual Healing. Now, we have gone in a number of ways talking about God is love, God's wisdom. We talk about that, but when you take into consideration all that what God is, it has to be something that is found within you that will embrace the harmony, the wholeness, and complete perfection that God has trying to establish in your life. Let's talk about the Omni God. Let's get into this Omni subject. Remember, it's all. We've heard these terms in all of our teachings. At one point or another in our Christian life, we've heard omnipotent, omnipotent, omnipresent. Okay? God's all power, God's all knowing, God's all present. The word omni or omnipotent or omniscient, omnipresent does not appear anywhere within the Hebrew scriptures. Does not appear anywhere within the New Testament scriptures. So those words are words that we have developed to be able to portray a concept of God that the scriptures themselves, over vast numbers of scriptures, describe. But there's something to these words that we're missing. Not so much missing, maybe, as much as neglecting. So let's take a look at them. Omnipotent, all power. So what is power? Today, the term power represents a number of things. I mean, we see it really, like in energy. We see it in force. We see it in our ability to do something, the ability to think. All these things are power. They're a form of power. And this is the power that we typically think of when you say all power, all powerful. All of these elements, roll into this. Omniscient, all knowing. What's knowing? Most knowing as we come from is generated from our mind, from our thoughts. It's scientific knowing. It could be book learning knowing. It could be knowing that comes from an inspiration of an idea. Suddenly you just knew this. And this is how the form of knowing comes about. And education in the long run is a long process of coming to know about something. Omnipresent, all present. Yeah, it's here and now. It's being present in the moment. It's meditation, mindfulness, giving an opportunity to be able to get in touch with your heart, your center core, being and knowing who you are and where you're at and how that affects other people, and how to be able to touch other people from that. That's what presence is, being present in the moment. When we take these three omni words for God's nature, we're then faced with this truth. In Isaiah it says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, saith the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." We have a boundary, a border, that we press up against but can't go beyond. because that's where we're at as far as we can think. God's bigger than our thinking. And God is telling us in this passage that he's way up there, way beyond where we're at in our thoughts of what power is, what presence is, what knowing is. He's way beyond that. So while we think we know what that means, we're not actually operating from the fullness of the model that Jesus demonstrated. And that's where I'm trying to bring this together in this study of oneness, is that we get back in tune with what these representations are for what God's nature is. These things that make us one with God. So how do we do that? Well, let's go look at Joel. Joel wrote in The Art of Meditation this passage. In meditation, we're seeking the grace of God and nothing but the grace of God. This grace is not found in the human mind, nor is it found in such peace as the world can give. Making statements and reading books about it do not bring it forth. It's meditation which lifts us to a state of spiritual apprehension where divine grace takes over. I'll read that last. It is meditation which lifts us to a state of spiritual apprehension where divine grace takes over. Now, meditation's got a bad reputation. Let's just put it succinctly. That's really what's happening in the Christian world, particularly. Not in other realms. In other religions, they practice it regularly. But Christians seem to think because they practice it, we can't. And that's not the truth. We're encouraged a number of times throughout all scriptures that we should be meditating. But this is the one process. This is the transformation, the metamorphosis process that we have to go from our carnal, human, mortal caterpillar into the pristine butterfly of Christ. We never attempt anything without meditation. We never begin any work without going into the depths of our being to make our conscious contact with God. That's from Joel's book, Consciousness Unfolding. We never attempt anything without meditation. Now, there's a number of schools of thought out there that would repeat that, saying we never attempt anything without prayer. Is there a difference between prayer and meditation? Yes, there is. Prayer, to most people out there, is you talking to God. Meditation is being still, being quiet, so God can talk to you. There's the difference. And some people can't shut up the mind, which is always trying to talk to God or talk to themselves about what their condition is. And because they don't have the ability of being able to silence their mind, they don't have an ability to be able to hear the still small voice of God talking to them. So we never attempt anything without meditation, without being still, without being quiet. You never begin any work without going into the depths of our being to make our conscious contact with God. A conscious contact with God. Not hoping that you're going to hear God, but to consciously contact with God, the still small voice in the depths of our being. We are one with God. I and the Father are one. But that oneness is of no help to us except in the degree of our realization of it. It is our conscious awareness of our oneness. For far too long, we've been unconscious of our awareness of oneness. We just don't know. We think, okay, yeah, great. But this is an activity that requires being conscious, being fully present in the moment. Just as God is fully present, you must too be fully present. And that's what meditation gives us the opportunity to do. We know that Jesus, as it says in Luke, came to pass in those days he went up to the mountain to pray at night and continued all night in prayer to God. This was his mode, his operation of being able to be in touch with the Father, to be at one with the Father, to commune with the Father. Because if he's the Son and he can only do what he sees the Father doing, that too is our model. And this is how he did it. Did he do it in meditation? Did he do it in prayer? Did he do it in a combination? We don't know. We only know that something worked. Something hit it. Something made it happen. And that's what the purpose of meditation is about, is to get you into the conscious awareness of your oneness with God, to be silent. As the scripture says, be still and know that I am God. You must be still to know that He is God. But you can only do that through purposeful meditation. So what do you meditate on? Here's some daily meditations that you could try. You can do them daily. Do it once a week. Do one once a week. Do one once a month. I don't know. It's up to you to decide what your routine's going to be. But meditation is simply probing, sensing, going into the inner depths. A lot of people say meditation is clearing your mind. No, it's not clearing your mind, because you can't clear your mind. What it is about is silencing your mind. You can't clear your mind simply because you have the mind of Christ. You want to touch that mind. But your human mind, that chatter that's going on in your brain every moment of every day, is what you're trying to learn how to silence, to take authority and control over, so you can hear what God has to say to you. Meditate on what is God. That question I asked at the beginning. Not what you've been told, but what God tells you. That's an important aspect that meditation is only going to provide. What does it mean to be one? What does it mean the kingdom is within? Who is I in Galatians 2:20? What does love your neighbor as yourself look like? What concepts have I accepted about God? What does it mean to live and breathe and have our being in Him? These are meditations, thoughts, questions that you ponder until you get a peace within you that resonates through you, that says, oh, I have the answer. I know what that's at. I know what these mean. I know what these mean to me. They don't have to mean the same thing to everybody. This is what my oneness with God is about. And that's hopefully what this will lead you towards. Because these are just the stepping stones to move you into a deeper oneness with the Father. So I hope you use this as a training, as a tool to be able to begin the process of meditation and get closer in your oneness with the Father, so that your Christhood can be displayed around the world. Thank you.